had in my mind the good woman, bad woman scenario, and any woman who was asking for money was not a relationship woman, and I resented it. So I had a lot of problems.
So with your Truth and Democracy Coalition, you fought propaganda and division. What lessons from politics applied directly to healing masculinity?
I've always felt that there are influences, propaganda influences that are coming in, and they're not in our control. And that's one thing, that there are powers greater than us who are manipulating the masses. And so this anti-male propaganda that has been flourishing.
The reason why men kill other men isn't because they didn't get love, it was because they felt disrespected. So my goal here is to try to help both sides understand each other better. Women want love, men want respect. Men, when they feel respected, will treat women lovingly in terms of protecting, providing, being a safe pair of hands, be responsible, X, Y, and Z. Hey Conscious Man 7 family, quick question before we start. Do you love the depth of these conversations but hate when ads break the flow? I get it. Ads can feel like speed bumps on a highway, pulling you out of that deep zone. That's why we created a way for you to enjoy every episode completely ad-free while supporting the show at the same time. For just a few bucks a month on Patreon or Locals, you'll get full access to uninterrupted episodes. You'll get direct access to me so you can ask me any questions that you have, some cool other perks like early releases, and you'll also help us keep bringing you the powerful conversations that mainstream platforms won't touch. The link is in the show notes. Join us there and be part of this movement. If you are new to this podcast, please don't forget to like, subscribe, and to share, because that helps us to be recommended in the algorithms. If you would like to support this podcast, please check out our merch store on Amazon with the brand Todd and Me. We've got some cool t-shirts, tank tops, hoodies, and sweaters. Link will be in the description of this podcast. And if you're now starting a spiritual journey, you would like to start a spiritual journey, or you're currently on a spiritual journey and you would like some help removing some fears and traumas, please hit me up on my Instagram at Adriano_246 and it will help you to get some magic mushrooms. Enjoy the show and stay tuned because we have some more great content coming soon. Hello friends, welcome to the Conscious Man 7 podcast, and I'm your host Todd Cave. Today we're delving deep into the fire. Rich Procida has lived it all, from surviving abuse to becoming a dating coach, democracy activist, and even leading red pill men's groups. He's faced mystical visions, battled cultural programming, and redefined what it means to be a man in today's polarized world. And here's the twist. He doesn't shy away from the controversial stuff. We're talking pornography, politics, hypergamy, and yes, Rollo Tomassi and the red pill movement. Some call it dangerous, others call it liberation. But today, we're not here for shadow takes. We're here to provoke thought, heal wounds, and unlock the higher potential of men and women. If you think you know masculinity, get ready to have your beliefs turned inside out.
When truth is blurred by lies and misinformation, perception becomes reality. What will you perceive your reality to be?
Liberate your fears and walk with me.
Sit down and meditate. Connect with your soul.
Be a monster and then learn how to control it.
You gotta be willing to do the work.
So it really goes really deep in terms of words and etymology and what they mean. So this is why it is really hard to really crack the matrix, because there's so many levels and layers to it, you know? Rich, welcome to the Conscious Man 7 podcast. How are you today, mate?
Good. Thank you for having me, Todd. I really have all this stuff has been like the mystical experiences, the education. It's really my life story.
Okay.
And that
yes.
is going to be, yeah.
Yes, I'm really looking forward to talking to you today because I've covered many, many different topics on my show, from the Anunnaki to spirituality, psychedelics, but I've never really delved a lot into the social dynamics between men and women, modern day society, and topics like hypergamy. So I'm really excited to delve into those topics because I think they're quite relevant today. And you are a dating coach. So I thought, well, you know what? Let me get someone who is a bit of an expert in that field to delve a little bit down that rabbit hole. And, I don't mind being controversial because sometimes you have to talk about these taboo subjects in order to provoke thought and to get people to think, and that is all what my show is about asking questions, provoking thought, and then people can make their minds up. So let's take it right back to the beginning. So can you take us back to how did surviving abuse and that mystical vision in a women's studies class set you on this path?
Well, the abuse, and this started very young as a child, and it was very, very confusing for me. And it set me back in ways, but it made me grow up in ways. I had completely different reactions to female behavior than my peers, my male peers. And it's partly because I was traumatized. And things that might turn on or excite a normal guy would trigger PTSD symptoms, such as, just the fight or flight syndrome. I would feel assaulted, and so many women are able to feel they can do anything when it comes to sex, they can almost walk around nude, but they're not used to somebody who's coming back and saying, hey, did I ask you to do that? Do I want to see that? Is that because, for example, I went to this one club and I didn't know that there was a burlesque show on the other side, and they were going to try and get all the guys in the concert, the show bar, to go next door to the burlesque show. And they thought that they could just come up and do whatever they wanted. And us guys would just be like dogs and follow them into the room. And I was trying to tell her, no, I don't want that. No, trying to get away from her. And still it happened. And so I have had to deal with a lot of things. Very young age, I realized, or I thought, that women have two guys, the men they marry and the men they like to have sex with. And I wanted to be the latter. And I wasn't really red-pilled. I wasn't really red-pilled at that time. I like to call myself brown-pilled because I wasn't really, I didn't have any knowledge of the red pill or anything like that. I just had my experience. I call it brown pill because my hopes for a relationship with a woman were shit on very, very early. And so that for some reason when I went to, and a lot of these things I'm still dealing with repressed memories coming up and more recent things, because it doesn't seem like the abusive behavior stops. It doesn't really stop. It seemed in my life maybe not to escalate, but to sort of be, and when I went to the fraternity, I thought I was going to find these sweet, intelligent women going to college, trying to make a career for themselves. That's what I thought. And I might be able to meet one and have a girlfriend. This is the type of thinking that I had. And I realized that women in their 20s are not relationship material generally. They're not even looking for a relationship at that point. They don't start looking for a relationship until they're in their 20s, or 30s, I mean. And so I was just horrified by what I saw, because I went to the fraternity hoping to meet a girlfriend. And what I discovered, or what in my mind I thought, was that there was nothing there. There were pretty girls, but I didn't have the money to pay for. It's another part. It's the whole thing of my life. Growing up working class, right? Didn't really have the money. Not only were women not dating, what I came out of high school, and really the option was married women, older married women. It's still all through my life, older, even now. at 60, the 70-year-old women want a guy in their 60s, 10 years younger than them. And they have their excuse for it, and the younger women want the older men. So it was like, very frustrating for me at my early life. And I didn't really, and so that's why I ended up studying feminism in a way, because I knew I had all these difficulties with women, because, one woman, one adult after another, and then when you get it, then when you grow up and you become an adult, you're 18 and over, it's still older women, and you just, and I had a lot of difficulty, really feeling like, after all of that, I couldn't understand why they thought they deserved to be paid for sex. I didn't understand that, because, after having been used as a child and as a teenage boy, and then going into adulthood, still women, why do they think they deserve to be paid? I had in my mind the good woman, bad woman scenario, and any woman who was asking for money was not a relationship woman, and I resented it. So I had a lot of problems. I knew I had difficulty dealing with women. So I decided, after I took a feminist studies course, which was called the Study of Women and Men in Society at USC, I started to get involved. I had this mystical experience. And I've actually had a number of mystical experiences, not just one. It goes all the way back to childhood and then even towards more recently. But this one sort of, set me on a path. It put me at that time in my life with the options I had. That's where I needed to do. And if you want me to, I can tell you about that experience. It's an interesting story.
So how did that experience, then, what you call a vision similar to Paul on the road to Damascus, what exactly did you see, and how did it reshape your views on men and justice, women?
Well, what happened was this class had 2 midterms and a final. And so I was causing some disruption because I would learn by asking questions, and I sort of challenging sometimes. But after the first midnight, I walked out. I was walking up the ramp of the lecture hall there, and then this ball of bright light appeared in front of me. And I was like, whoa, what's that? But I didn't think it was going to happen again. I thought, wow, that was an experience. That's enlightenment, right? That was an experience of, at first I thought just an enlightenment. I've been enlightened as to something. I couldn't articulate it, but there's something going on where I'm gaining this ineffable knowledge, which is what happens when you have a vision. William James, who was the father of American psychology, wrote a book called The Varieties of Religious Experience, where he identified what he called a photo or a photon, but a vision of light, and then a voice, an audition. I didn't have the voice. Paul had the voice, for example. Paul heard, Paul, why are you persecuting me? I didn't hear anything. And the message, which I didn't get until later, which was at actually the final exam. At the second exam, I came walking out. It was even bigger. It was an even bigger ball of light I ran into. And I made an exclamation, whoa, and I got in trouble for that. The teacher saying, you interrupt the exam again. I tried to tell them I'm having this experience, but they're thinking I'm purposely interrupting the exam. So on the final exam, I didn't expect it the second time. And so this time I'm going to be ready for it. And so I made sure that I kept my mouth closed. If I were going to see the light, that I would not make the exclamation. But as I walked up, it was a huge ball of light. It was huge. And I clamped down on my mouth. And then next thing I know, I'm out, right? I'm smelling this acidy feeling, and there are paramedics there, and they're bringing me back to consciousness. And they're thinking it was a seizure or something like that. But I knew it was a seizure because immediately I felt the knowledge. What was this message? Like, Paul, why are you persecuting women? Why am I persecuting women? Was the message. And that I got at that time, not recognizing really men's situation, but also recognizing my situation, because the abuse came with both positive and negative aspects. So our results. And so, they wanted to take me on the stretcher. But I knew that this wasn't a seizure, because seizures have different results. Seizures often have negative results, like you have an aura, and then you have confusion, and it's not a pleasant post-seizure experience. But a vision, on the other hand, brings ineffable knowledge. It brings change. It brings transformation. It's a positive experience. But that set me toward minoring in the study of women and men in society at USC, the University of Southern California. I joined the Students Alliance for a Non-Sexist Society and became a founding member of that group. And then I started my own organization called People Against Pornography. It was a pro-feminist anti-pornography group. And I was into feminists like Catherine McKinnon, Andrea Dworkin, and those anti-pornography feminists. And it's part of a way of dealing with my own issues. I've always sort of dealt publicly with my own issues, but also feeling as a man, what can I can work on violence against women. I can work on issues of the sexual exploitation of women and all these attitudes. So I'm working on my issues. I'm speaking at colleges. I'm debating lawyers. I'm writing articles for newspapers. And eventually I went to law school. And by that time I was pretty burned out on the subject, but I ended up turning it into a book, a survey of social attitudes and laws towards sexually explicit materials in a variety of nations throughout the world. And I think it's still in print. It's called Social Issues in Global Perspective, Pornography. And it's part of a series of books that I wrote with a professor talking about social issues in global perspective, doing sort of the same thing with other issues. So that was the fruition of all of that. It sort of helped me to start to understand the political situation between women and men from a one-sided perspective. But really what I found later on in life, more recently, I discovered the red pill. And I realized even after all that study, after all that, right, I knew nothing about women until I got exposed to the red pill. It was much later in life. And now what I want to do is I want to bring that information to young men, to the extent that they can accept it, and to other men, so that they don't go through what I went through. And so that's basically where that went. And it changed my perspective, but it didn't really have the impact that I wanted it to have. And so one thing I learned is that never try and meet women in a place where you're not welcome. So you've got that. And then I ended up leaving feminism because of a sort of change in its goal, which was, at first it was equality. I was into the principles. I was developing a theory, sort of like Marxism, but from a feminist perspective, of patriarchy. And I ended up writing a book, but where was I going to go from there?
Okay. So this is interesting. So how you've worked in both pro-feminist movements and men's rights spaces. How did you reconcile those two worlds?
Well, I studied feminism. I got burnt out for a while, but I'm still interested in those things. But eventually, I was still. It's not that I didn't have relationships. I had relationships, and they were primarily sexual, because basically, what's a relationship about? It's financial, and so anyway, I wasn't finding the woman that I wanted anyway. And so I was with this woman who was kind of abusive, kind of narcissistic. I was with her for 20 something years, one night a week, booty call. That was it. But I was just happy at that time to have a woman coming over to have sex with me. I was lucky just to be able to do that, I felt. And a lot of men right now, we discover, are lonely and in despair and are very frustrated. And but what happened was I ended that relationship. I found a way to end it, and I started to look at dating coaches. And then that's when I got exposed to the red pill. And the red pill is basically just evolutionary psychology and men's experience. It's not misogynistic type of men getting together saying we hate. It's not the We Hate Women Club, from the Rascals. What the Little Rascals, they had a hate women club. It's not that. It's really about men trying to learn how to interact with women, how to be successful in their relationships with women. And so that's what I want to share. I want to, as both a warning and as an aid for men. So I reconciled them because any feminist, and indeed any socialist, knows and should know and should believe that patriarchy or capitalism oppresses all of us. They're constantly trying to find a working class narrative to bring working class men. I'm not condoning feminism. I'm not condoning socialism or anything like that. I'm just saying they should recognize that in their own theory, that men are oppressed under these systems too. Even feminists understand that men are suppressed under these systems in their thinking. Now, maybe men are suppressed, but not in the way that they think, but still, they should recognize that. And that equality means actually women really don't want equality. That's one thing that we realize. And women, it's not about equality. One thing I'm doing, this little quote, men die for women and children. It has nothing to do with equality here. Our relationships are in no way equal. And so I left the movement, the feminist movement, when they made this decision in the 90s that feminism was going to be about pursuing women's interest. It was not about principle. It was not about equality. It was about pursuing women's interest. And I felt that I was looking for theoretical explanations and trying to develop a feminist political ideology. And pursuing women's interests wasn't necessarily what I signed up for. I signed up for an equal society, one that where there was change, things would change. And I didn't feel like the focus on women. And the reason they did that was because they couldn't agree. At the time they were saying there's libertarian feminists, there's liberal feminists, there's socialist feminists, all sorts of different types of feminists, right? And none of them could really agree. They couldn't agree on an ideology. So my work to try to develop a feminist ideology, people already had ideological commitments. They already were committed ideologically. So there was no way of bringing everybody around an ideology like feminism or an ideology like socialism. There was no way of bringing women around that. They already had their ideological commitments. So the natural result was just to say, well, we're pursuing women's interests.
Okay, so I got a question then. So you're saying then that in the feminist movement, which started, I would say, probably in the 60s, and there are different waves. So you're saying that in the 90s, there was a active decision by the people at the top of the movement that sort of like put like this stake in the road and said, we are going this way, that instead of, because I'll be honest, when I first heard about feminist, the word feminist and feminism, I think I was probably about maybe 26 or 27. And funnily, it was from this girl. And well, it's kind of funny because she said to me she's a feminist, and I was like, oh, okay, I would like to hear about that. To be honest, I already said that because I wanted to sleep with her, right? So, you know what I mean? Because I was interested in it, I guess she gave me a pass, right? But yeah, but I didn't really spend any time on it because I thought that it was like the promotion of, I guess, equal rights for women, because women have fought to get certain rights. But you're saying that in the 90s, it was an active decision by people in the movement in the United States, or probably globally, you'd have to tell me, to put it in the direction that feminism is about the interests of women. So when you say interests of women, can you elaborate more on what you mean by that?
Well, it's just the fact that they couldn't rally around. So women's interest, employment, raising salaries, women's advancement in society, support for problems like for women, like domestic violence and things like that. These are things that are in women's interest. Equality, on the other hand, is not necessarily in women's interest. In fact, when you get red pill, you realize that women are not even looking for equality when they're dating. Sure, they like it in the workplace. They might like it in politics. They may think it's fine. But when they're dating, they're not looking for equality. They're looking for a guy who's bigger, stronger, more powerful, successful, has more than them, has a higher status than them. They're looking for inequality. Our relationships are based on inequalities. Some could say differences, inequalities, compatibility, complementary, but they're not equal. Women aren't even looking for a man. They're looking for who is equal to them. They're looking for a man who is superior to them. So we begin there. There's no desire for equality in relationships. And there are certain things that women do not want equality. They don't want equality in the draft, certainly.
True.
Yeah, they don't, there's a lot of, they don't want equality in relationships, although what women really want is equality when it benefits them, and inequality when it benefits them.
I tend to concur with that statement in my experience of women, because, it's funny because I've dated quite a few women. And in recent years, when I try to have these conversations with women, they always get very emotionally charged, because what majority of women, and I'm going to repeat that, the majority, not all, because one of the things that I find when you're talking to women is that they don't really hear words like the majority or most. Most women, when they hear information, they interpret it as you're talking about them. So you would make a generalized statement, and most of the time their reply is, well, that's not applicable to me. So I find that this is something that the majority of women do. There are exceptions. So I speak in generality, and I make room for the exceptions. But even when they do that, still most women don't hear that. But I digress. And I find that most women today don't realize that they have a lot of privilege when it comes to relationships and just how society works. Because, for example, when you go to clubs, like the big clubs, women get in free and men have to pay to get in. That is not equal, right? And when men go on dates with women, men generally play on the first date. That's not equal. So I find that there's no recognition that, there is privilege that they do have, and that some things are more beneficial to them than others. So, but I want to, before we get too far down there, because I want to save that juicy topic for a little bit later, but I'm curious to know, what did you learn from founding a pro-feminist anti-pornography organization, and do you still see porn as a central issue today?
Well, I think pornography at that time, I was trying, again, raising consciousness. And I don't see it as central an issue, although it is right at the center of, but I think that for me, there were more than just one situation. In my book, I talk about four, and I don't know if I remember them all, but there's not only effect with violence against women, which is a part, some pornography does promote that, but also our relationships, women's status and equality. And there was a fourth one, it's in my book here somewhere, but it affects more than just, is this causing violence against women? It's our relationships are affected by this. At least I thought at that time, and whether women, the equality. So I did some studies on that. What does a liberal society, do women have more rights? Is there more violence around sexually, sex shops? Is there more violence caused? Because you got to remember that everything we take in, everything we consume, it has an effect on us. I used to go around and pornography has no impact on me. It's not going to cause me to abuse or rape or anything like that. And well, thank you. I'm glad it doesn't cause you to do that. And I'm sorry that it doesn't have any effect on you, because it certainly has an effect on me. So in the end, I concluded that pornography had both positive and negative aspects. As I started speaking to people, I also listened. And this one woman said, what we need is more speech, not less speech. We don't need to restrict speech, but we do need people talking about these issues. So I think that there's some very positive aspects to pornography and some negative aspects. And in my book, I try to bridge the gap to help both sides see each other's side's position, because there is scientific evidence demonstrating that these materials do impact our behavior. And one would expect the materials we consume to impact our behavior and to have an effect on us. Certainly pornography has an effect on us, or it wouldn't sell. Nobody would buy it. So there's certainly an impact.
True.
And that impact is not all negative. I mean, it's a positive thing. I mean, so many men are living alone. Pornography, I like to say, is poor man's sex. It may be the only thing he's got. And it's always men who are being squeezed, right? Oh, we need to keep them away from pornography or they won't date real women. But I can only guarantee you that most of these guys want a woman in their room and not a woman on their computer. Most of the guys want more than just sex, I think. I mean, I talk for myself. I want affection. I want love. I want a relationship, right? I think most men have that. And what gets in the way is not men, but sometimes it's women who get in the way of that. And so I think pornography has both positive and negative aspects. And but I don't think it's the issue. It kind of is, it's kind of changed.
Yeah,
That we can get
that definitely has changed. And we can touch about that, because I think that things like OnlyFans has completely disrupted the entire dynamic of dating now, and female promiscuity, as well as the false idea of sexual liberation. But I don't want to get too far down the line with that yet. So you've produced Bible studies for progressives. What does reinterpreting sacred texts through equality and consciousness look like in practice?
Well, I think we need to recognize that all religion is political. Every religion. We didn't really get the idea of a separation before of religion and politics until the Enlightenment. Before that, religiously, kings were gods or emissaries of gods. You worship the gods. as a part of your civic duty and responsibility, so that the gods won't come down and cause a famine or something like that. So there was a hierarchy, the gods and the leaders, and sometimes the leaders were gods. And this is where the story of Jesus comes out as a king and as the savior of the world and the only king. But so if we recognize that, then we can see at the root of it, it's about living in community on a positive sense. It's about how we live with one another as a community. How do we care for the poor, care for the needy, lift up the lowly? How do we seek justice? How do we bring down the powerful? How do we govern? This is what religion is originally about. It was the temple was the seat of government. They were not separated. So, so when we look at Scripture, and I can speak primarily to Christianity, although I think this is true of all religion, it is a context, what John Dominic Crossan calls the matrix, the cultural, social, political, historical context in which these texts were written. So in order to interpret them, you have to have an idea of what was the situation they were talking about. You have to know you have to sort of have some knowledge of the original language, Greek or Aramaic or Jewish language. You have to, so you put together all these things, and the political situation is central. So when you read scriptures, not all scriptures, but when you read scriptures, there's this political undercurrent. There's the in the Bible, there's the Roman Empire, there's the priests, the Pharisees, all these political leaders, and the oppression, even Moses, leaving Egypt, escaping slavery. All of this stuff is political stuff. And so when you read the text, you can see the threads of justice, God's justice. Bring salvation to the world did not mean go to heaven and live forever. It meant bringing God's kingdom to this world, bringing salvation to the other world, being a light to the nations so that all the nations can look and see what it means to be ruled by God. What type of society is one that is ruled by God? Not godly in a sense of being moral and being uptight and being, asexual, but more as, do you hope the orphan, the widow, the foreigner, the poor? These are the groups of people that the Bible says we should give charity to, that we should provide for, that we should make sure to support. These are the groups we should have compassion and empathy for. And this is treat the foreigner as one native born. So it's really, there's two sides to the Bible, because each position can be, both conservative and liberalism can be supported in the Bible. But that sense that Jesus came for a mission to the people, to lead the nation, to create a just and loving world. And that's part of what being religious is to make a difference.
Well, that is supposed to be true in theory, but from what I see, religion is, I'm just going to say, it's probably the worst invention ever given to man, because there's a lot of rape, murder, pillage, and killing that's been done in the name of religion and God. And I think in the beginning, in the origins, I think that there was, some good works and intentions, but I think that the evolution of religion to how it is today is something that has really affected humanity in really grave ways, So you've said inner healing is inseparable from outer transformation. Why do you believe personal trauma and democracy activism are linked?
Okay. Well, I wanted to address a little bit about what you just said, because one of the things is that there's an author, and I can't remember his name, but he wrote a book called The Righteous Mind, Why Good People Disagree About Religion and Politics. And what he said when people say things that religion has caused all this, I say, people do it. I mean, we just kill. Human beings do that. I mean, it's politics. I mean, you want if religion and politics, if you put those words in the same word, you'll see politics has led to murder. Politics has led, to all this stuff too. So it's not saying that.
I agree.
Yeah, yeah. So that the religion itself is not necessarily good or bad. It's really how you use it. There's a lot of good that has come from religion. We wouldn't have democracy. We wouldn't have the nation state. We wouldn't have individual human and civil rights. I mean, we may have it, but we may have come to it from different angles. But that came out of Christianity. The nation state itself and the rights of the individual came out of religion. The idea of equal souls before God, that we may be slave, no more slave or free, no more male or female, no more, and there was another one there. But the main thing was that Paul's words echoed through history and brought us the rights of the individual. What he was doing when he said something about slavery, he's bringing people into the church, a place where everyone's equal. So come into a community here where there is no slave and no free, none of these, no foreigner, no woman, no man, none of these distinctions. So religion has had both a positive influence and a negative influence. And I think it's sort of a mistake to really view it in the negative entirely, because that's part of the problem of, which we'll get into later, of propaganda, the idea that, imagine a world with no religion. Well, I don't know. There's a lot of good that comes out of people having faith and hope and thinking about ethics and justice. But what happens is that oftentimes religion gets used by people who have other motives, or that people get confused, and people, it's like politics. So that's the problem, where when we separate religion from politics and sort of blame religion, we're not really looking at the whole picture there. Now, the question you had for me was
why
the connection.
Yeah, why do you believe personal trauma and democracy activism are linked?
Okay, well, I think everybody who's had a trauma sometimes finds themselves, I guess if they're healthy and good, in a situation where they want to prevent that trauma from happening again. And they want to do something about it. They want to take action. And it's both healing in the sense of that you're taking action to support yourself, to deal with your experiences, and to raise awareness and to help other people who may have had those experiences. So one thing about feminism says that the personal is political, and that's what a lot of these so-called feminists now, who are really, it's a lot of propaganda now. They forget that the personal is political, and what that meant was that women living in the home, in the private sphere, we had this private sphere and public sphere, that's not personal, The fact that women are stuck in the home working and unhappy, which is what Betty Friedan wrote in her book, The Feminine Mystique, is not just a personal issue. It's a political issue. It's a larger social issue. So the things that affect us personally are often also political, because the women are in the home because they're not allowed to work, right? Or they don't make enough money, or whatever the reason they want to give. So I think there's a personal connection. There's a personal desire to make a difference, to make some change. You've had this experience. Now it gives you some mission to make it, to change that, to keep that from happening again. And also gives us some insight, and our own personal, what they call lived experience, can give us some insight into helping others and dealing with some of these social issues which have an impact on us and on our lives. So, like if a person suffered some torture, right, and they stand up and say, this is what I went through. I don't want anybody else to do. And these are the policies we need to do. And we need some justice for the people who did those things. And like for me, sexual abuse, verbal abuse, we need some awareness, and the fact of female behavior and the sort of exploitation, abuse of both women and men sexually and in systems of prostitution or in our cultural dynamics. There's a lot of politics to that. And we can see now that I've come to the conclusion, or one of my views is possible, is that this whole rise in authoritarianism across the globe is connected to women's negative propaganda against men. That this system, that we had a time when women weren't working and men were the providers. Now women are working, they don't need men for money anymore. Men are revolting because now there's no need for them.
It's true. Men have almost become like disposable commodities to some degree.
Right.
So with your Truth and Democracy Coalition, you fought propaganda and division. What lessons from politics apply directly to healing masculinity?
Well, I think healing masculinity is a big topic, and propaganda is a big topic, and emasculation and women's collective behavior and the social constructs that they create. That covered a lot of areas, so you're going to have to remind me again of what we're actually talking about. But all these areas. So, can you repeat that question?
Sure. So, with regards to your Truth and Democracy Coalition, you fought propaganda and division. So, how do you see that those things have directly impacted masculinity, or were detrimental, or even can have some healing, to masculinity? Because we've touched on that how there is emasculization of men today. So how do you think then that Truth and Democracy Coalition has affected or masculinity to any degree?
Well, I tell you that the Truth and Democracy Coalition I developed because people on the left were trying to take the word democracy, say, let's not use it, let's use voting rights. And I've always felt that there are influences, propaganda influences that are coming in, and they're not in our control. And that's one thing, that there are powers greater than us who are manipulating the masses. And so this anti-male propaganda that has been flourishing, and it goes under the name of feminist, but there's a need, this political entrepreneurialism, there's a need to keep people angry, to identify causes or blame, to put blame, and to keep them active and donating money. So and also that combines with women's tendency to create social constructs that keep men in line. Men are the ones who have to give up their sexual strategy to enter a committed relationship, whereas a woman sort of keeps her sexual strategy sort of secret. Yeah, she commits to a man, but she still could have her eye out for something better. Always looking for the biggest, baddest, or the best she can do. Maybe if she thinks she can do better, she's out. So there's no real commitment to men. And then the negativity of men are toxic. I have this shirt I'm wearing right now, and on the back, I don't know if you can see it here, it says, I don't know if you see it, it says masculinity is not toxic, masculinity is attractive. And why is that? Because women are attracted to that powerful, potentially dangerous, maybe bad boy, rich, who will make sure that he's going to survive. And so they're attracted to that toxicity. In fact, hybristophilia is something that only women have, which is a paraphilia that some women are attracted to dangerous criminals. And so they write these men in jail. Men don't do that,
It's
right?
true. It's true. It's true.
Right.
Very true.
Yeah. Yeah. We don't write Lorena Bobbitt. I don't know if you remember the one who cut her husband's
penis off.
We don't say, bring your scissors, that's a turn on, but women do. So, but masculinity is not toxic. They're attracted to that, but it's a construct that puts the blame on men, and women have a lot of difficulty with accountability. So with masculinity, one thing is being positive about men. Stop being so negative. We're not dogs. We're not trash. We're not just out for a good time. We're not just out to have sex with women and we need to be corralled in to have a relationship with a woman. I mean, the fact of the matter is a lot of these women, there's a lot of risk for men entering a relationship. And a lot of the women are not relationship material. In fact, most of the women that you run into are not.
I concur 100%. I concur.
Yeah.
The dating market right now is almost like a battlefield, to be honest with you. So I think this is a good segue to dive right into these topics because I wanted to get a little bit of a background on yourself and where you come from to get into really the meat and veg of what you talk about and stuff like that, which is dating, relationships, and masculinity. So dating today feels like a battlefield. Why do you think relationships have shifted so dramatically in the modern age?
Well, the first thing to recognize is that our dating strategies are adversarial. They're not. So women are if we are trying to get something from men, and men are trying to get something from women, and if we told them what we really wanted, we would never get it. If I said, all I want is sex, you're never going to get it, right? If a woman says, all I want is your money, primarily, your sperm and a bank account, she's never going to get it. So they're adversarial. Men's strategy is to date and be with as many women as possible, to spread our seed. That's our innate strategies. Women's strategy is to kind of like focus on one guy and take him down. Get the biggest, baddest, richest guy you can. And so we get these stories about, say, polygamy and how the women were so oppressed in the ancient world because they were polygamists. But those women wanted to be in those harems. They again, these were the guys with the money. They wanted to be in those harems. It's like today, women can complain about how men are, but that's the men they want. When it comes down to it, they want the rich guy. It's like I was saying, it's kind of like advocate for the 99% during the day and then serve the 1% at night. So we start off with this adversarial. We're trying to get something from the other that the other doesn't necessarily want to give us.
I agree because I find that as a man that is still in the dating game, sometimes you approach women and it's literally very adversarial. It's almost like there is this sort of entitlement sort of attitude, well, why are you even coming to talk to me? Who are you? And I mean, back in the day, because I remember I was speaking to some mates of mine, this is before mobile phones, so we're talking in the 90s. You would approach a girl, and I mean, she may have a boyfriend, but she was never that super dismissive of you, of almost looking down at you. And I remember I have had women literally look at me from head to toe and ask me, what do you want? Very, very, like you say, adversarial, So
Yeah.
it's the dating game has really changed a lot. And then, so you talk about hypergamy a lot. So hypergamy is one of the most hotly debated ideas. Do you see it as biological truth, cultural conditioning, or a bit of both?
I think probably both. I think that there's an innate tendency, hypergamy, to need to date up, and a lot of the men's rights will say it's a feature, not a bug. So it's a feature of women's nature that they seek the one who can provide for their children and as better than anyone else, right? Who can provide for them and their children, who can protect them and their children, and if women didn't pursue this, then we wouldn't have a society. But I think on the other hand, we all have to restrain our impulses. We all are responsible for our behaviors. I can be attracted to a lot of women, but I'm not going to act on it. Women can be attracted to a man's money. They can want his, status, but that doesn't mean they should always act on it. And so I think that's one thing that is there. And then this idea of equality. I mean, I want to stick to the subject, but they're really that when we get economic equality, then it's really hard because women can now pay for sex. They go to these strip clubs, they're paying these male strippers, they're paying male prostitutes. They can pay for sex. They are doing, the hookup culture. They like to complain about it, but what that really is women sharing men. They have their chads, they have they have men that they want for sex, and then they're looking for men to pay the bills. And they'd like to have that in the same guy, but most often it doesn't come. I mean, the guy who's got muscles, is good looking, probably doesn't have to worry too much about money, having a lot of money, because the women still come to him. But the guy who doesn't have any good looks, he's got to focus on making money, because that's the only way he's going to get the woman he wants. So they're not going to come in the same package. So when women make their own money and they don't need us for support, they really don't need us for protection that much. That's still there, but they don't need us for financials. They would like to have us for sex, but then who are they going to choose, right? So it's not, and if they're willing, they'd rather, there's a saying, they'd rather be a mistress to a king than the wife of a pauper. These women would rather share guys than to actually have a guy for themselves who's not exactly what they want.
Okay, so that's a very interesting distinction there. So why is it then that women tend to, how should I say, they try to poo-poo a man's sort of like natural instinct, which is to have more than one woman. So a man's natural proclivity is to have multiple partners because my theory is that because back in the day we used to go to war, we didn't even know if we would come back home. So we tended to have many children, many partners for the protection of our seed, right? And that seems to have translated today into our modern society where men tend to still want to have multiple partners. So that is a preference of men. But a woman has a preference where she wants a man that's superior to her, like you described, a man that's taller than her, smarter than her, stronger than her, makes more money than her, and superior in all these ways. So why is it then that a woman's preference is supposed to be taken as sacrosanct and it should be allowed, but a man's preference of having multiple partners, why is that ridiculed or just said, oh, he's an insecure man and all that kind of stuff? What do you think? There's this sort of like paradigm where women's preferences must be protected and catered to, but a man's preferences should be rubbished. We just dismiss them now. You're not a good man, XYZ. Why is that?
Well, the short answer is the feminine imperative, that women have this imperative of locking down the best possible guy they can get to get for both money, finances, and genes, good genes. They want to have a child, and that's determined by looks primarily. So they want good genes, good financial, and protection and support. So, so the feminine imperative, and also women create these social constructs, right? The idea that men are sort of supposed to capitulate and give up their sexual strategy, their mating strategy, and that somehow women are almost, that men are the problem, that men are the ones who are running around, men are the ones who won't settle down, men are the ones that do this, and not realizing that women date non-exclusively all the time. I mean, it's just natural. We think that we're the ones wanting to date multiple. No, women, they get more action. You know, they can go out a guy for lunch and go out with another guy for dinner. They can go out and they don't necessarily they don't necessarily have to have sex with all these guys, but they'll choose the ones they want to have sex with and have sex with the one they want to, right? And he may not even have to take them out on a date. In fact, they may even pay him. So
that's a fact.
yeah. So they're not dating multiple people. They're not. They're the ex. They're more than a lot of men are just trying to get a girlfriend. We're lucky to have a date. A lot of guys are lucky just to get a date, you know, and they get goo-goo-eyed over one woman. They get this one-itis. It's called one-itis. She's the one. She touched my pee-pee. She must be the one, you know. And they don't really. Men are lonely and in despair, and women keep them that way. And they want to deceive us into thinking that, one, we shouldn't be doing what we're doing, but we absolutely have to. Or they want to deceive us as to our value, because they don't want us to know how valuable we are. And so that they could then, you know, they sort of bring us down so that they can have us, right? So, so there's a lot of things that are going on here. They take these social constructs, and then dating non-exclusively is an absolute must for men. You know, to think that you're just going to hop on with the first woman who comes up to you, and you're going to have a committed relationship with that woman. No, if you're in demand, women are sharing you. I mean, now for me, I could have 5 different women. They're not going to be the quality of women that I want. They may not be relationship material. A lot of these women are not relationship material. Why should you hop into a relationship with a woman who's not relationship material? You're going to have to go through a lot of women to find the one that is relationship. First of all, to find one that is relationship material, and then she has to like you, and you have to like her, and all that stuff. So if you do hit that, like I felt I may have found that. I feel if it doesn't work out, I can double back at 65. I'm 60 now. But if you can find that woman who is relationship material, then there's a reason to stop. But you need to see. Well, you need also the experience. Men need to be competent sexually. They need sexual competence. So that's one good thing about prostitution. I mean, there's negatives, but there's a good thing about it. A lot of guys, they can't get it otherwise, and you can become competent sexually. So basically, but we need to date non-exclusively. You need to go, just like women, to get the best guy, they need to go through a lot of guys. And for us to get the best women, we got to go through a lot of women. And somehow this social contract, somehow we're wrong for dating multiple women is a sort of a form of keeping us down. You know, like you just have to accept what you're offered. You don't get to do the choosing. You don't get to do the selecting. Women do the selecting, and the men are just sort of passive vessels here who have to be tamed and rodeoed in, because otherwise they'll be out screwing everything that moves.
I agree. Women have sex with who they choose, and men who have sex with who they can.
Yes.
So
yes.
You lead book studies on Rollo Tomassi's The Rational Male. What do you think Tomassi gets right about male to female dynamics, and where do you think, if he does, mislead men?
Well, I think I think he gets a lot right. I mean, I go through the book and I'm amazed at how much he gets right, you know. And But there are some things, and it usually comes out to politics. For me, I think the gender dynamics are great. They've really helped me to develop the proper attitude, first of all, and to develop some type of game and to recognize women's nature and what's going on and to take the action of dating non-exclusively, despite the criticism from my family and from women and from church people and conservative people, you know. And so all those things, so I think he gets a lot. But when it comes to politics, if he's telling that we're going to withdraw the 19th Amendment, you know, something stupid like that.
Is that the one that for women to vote?
Women to vote, yeah. There's still some discussion on that somewhere, but I think that's ridiculous. I don't think we're going. He says something like, what we need to do is go forward, not backwards. And I agree with him on that. But sometimes things like, you know, women need to go back into the home, or we need to move back to some type of traditional sort of relationship is probably not the future. And particularly if he wants to talk about democratic politics and Donald Trump and all of these people, when the men are going that direction, and I'm not going that direction.
Okay, I'm curious. So, if we have a situation where, because women have entered the workforce and women are competent and they make more money, then that has changed the dating market, because, as you have said, women tend to want a man that's superior than them in all areas, right? So if women now are making just as much as men, and we know that there are, even on the man's side, only a few men make six figures and up. So that is probably, out of all the population of men, maybe top 5% of men make six figures or more. So if women now are making six figures, it means then that their dating pool, by just sheer numbers, goes down. So why would it be sort of like going backward if women were to not necessarily want to work, but to choose to just find a man that would take care of them, provide for them, and take care of his children, as opposed then to want to go in the workforce and to have a career? Why do you think then that his position that women should go back into the home is going backward, considering that now women have entered the workforce and are making their own money, that we have the problems that we have in the dating market now?
Well, let me just clarify. I'm not sure if I can say Rollo Tomassi's position is that. I'm not sure that what his position actually is, whether they should go back into the home or not. But I know a lot of the guys probably feel that way. And a lot of the red pill community probably feels that way. But I think that when going forward means that it's just not going to happen. You know, women, you can't put the genie back in the bottle. You can't put equality back in the bottle. You know, it's there. You can't put the pill back in the bottle. It's there. You know, there was a restraint on women who might get pregnant, you know, that prevented them from behaving promiscuously. But now they don't have that restraint anymore. We're not putting these things back into the bottle. They're not going to go away. So, and I'm not sure that having women in the home was a great situation either. I mean, if we think they want to say something like, there's maybe one thing that I disagree that women are happier in the home as homemakers. But no, that's why we had that's why we had the second wave of feminism in the first place. When Betty Friedan, who was an instructor of mine at USC, when she wrote that book, it was because women were unhappy with that situation. They have so much more potential. A lot of women have a lot of potential. They can contribute a lot. You know, they're in the State Department. You know, they can run for president. You know, they can lead. They have a lot of abilities and a lot of potential. And we're wasting that, and they might feel that they're being wasted if they end up just playing a traditional role. And it's nice because I have a girlfriend who wants to be a wife, and I don't think most women really want to be a wife. They don't want to do the wifely duties. So, but moving forward means that we take what is and what's probably not going to change, and this has to do with some level of acceptance, as well as, do we really want to go back? Is that really better? It wasn't for women. And to think about it, there's a show called Dobie Gillis. I don't know, The Many Loves of Dobie Gillis, 1950s. The women were all about money. I mean, are we really want to go back to that? Because when you talk about how women treat you negatively, and that was one of the things that I felt too, they have a higher value, a higher sexual market value than us. They don't recognize we're peons at 20, so they treat us like garbage. They manipulate us. They've done a lot of things, to me, and they really messed me up. But yeah, they have that attitude. They have that privilege. They feel entitled to our money, entitled to our attention. So I think going forward would mean adapting to the reality it is. We're going to have equality. Women are going to be in the workplace. They're going to be making as much money as us. But will men start to stand up for themselves? That's where I'm going. You need to be able to stand up for yourself. We're not going to be able to have more money than these women. Women need to learn that plenty of women have huge. They talk about this is another form of gaslighting that women engage in. No, man, they have such trouble not paying for dates. And the man insists on paying. As if women don't have trouble paying on dates. I mean, there's so many women, the vast majority of women. I've done a woman say, I will pay for nothing. I walked out on that woman. I will pay for nothing. So many women have huge, terrible difficulty pulling out their checkbook and paying for a date. They make just as much money as us, but they still want us to provide for them. People will not give up their privilege unless they're forced to do so. And that probably comes from Robin Wright and the fragile white movement and the anti-racist movement, that people don't give up their privilege very easily. As women age, they start to lose power and they start to become very resentful about it. I like to say, if you want to know why older men date younger women, why don't you ask your younger self why you dated an older man? Why don't you ask young women why they're dating? Because I find that more gross than, a woman dating a man, than, that a woman would go up and marry a man just basically for money. They're not sexually attracted to him. They want power. I find that to be grotesque. I find that to be not ideal. And yet it's like these women say, well, I understand why those women are doing it. Okay, you understand, and it will continue to blame the men. And I think this talks about something you talked about earlier, which is called solipsism. Because women innately were born and they were vulnerable, but they had a child to protect, everything had to come through them. Everything was about them. Give me the money, give me the food, give me the protection, go kill the animal for me, make sure, everything had it. So solipsism, everything is about themselves. And this is one reason why when you bring up to a woman generalities of women, they will come back with you, but it's not me. Because they have this, right? They have this myth of the good girl and the bad woman. And women will be very honest with you about what they think about other women. Watch out for that woman. Watch out. They're very honest with you about other women, but they won't be honest with you about themselves. So
that's a fact.
Yeah.
So, okay, I'm curious here. So some critics say the red pill creates bitterness towards women. From your experience, does it help men heal or trap them in cynicism?
I feel that you need to have a little bit of bitterness towards women. You need to have a little bit of skepticism. You need to have a little bit of wariness. You need to understand their true nature. If we think that women are sweet and spice and everything nice, that's a myth. That's not how women are. So we need to have the correct attitude. If that's part of being a blue pill beta, being the nice guy, being so subservient to women, making sure that you provide for them, that they know you're there for them, all the things that we're taught to be good. If I understood how much money was in power and all this stuff was to women, I may have never followed Jesus, because Jesus wasn't about those things, but for women they are. And so they had, yeah. So I forgot where I was going with it. So
No, I agree with you in the sense where, like, I have found now that in my personal development, when you as a man understand better female nature, it allows you to navigate the dating market better and become more attractive. Now, I think that the only way that men get to that point is through pain, rejection, failure, a lot of broken hearts, or a few, and going through the fire when it comes to women. And it's not that I think women are bad, but I think that women are a lot more complicated than men. And men are, let's be honest, simpletons. Men are so basic that, and I tell this to girls that are my friends, that I have platonic friends, and then if they're dating me, I say to girls, look, if y'all understood how simple men are, y'all would get the best out of a man, because men operate on in the realm of respect. Men don't necessarily want love, men want respect, because in man to man dynamics, whether this is in the workplace or competition or even as mates, we look at respect between men. And the reason why men kill other men isn't because they didn't get love, it was because they felt disrespected. So my goal here is to try to help both sides understand each other better. Women want love, men want respect. Men, when they feel respected, will treat women lovingly in terms of protecting, providing, being a safe pair of hands, be responsible, X, Y, and Z. Men that have two brain cells to rub against when they feel disrespected is when they don't want to do those things. Because most of the time, if you actually hear men talk about women, they would say, oh, she was disrespectful to me. They don't start, oh, she didn't love me. They say she disrespected me. And that's one of the things that I try to tell a lot of women, that men don't think like you. And on the flip side, men need to understand that women don't think like them. So one of the things that I have found in my dating life now, since I've started to understand this, is that because women don't think logically for the most part, you have to have a virtue called patience. So you have to repeat things many times, sometimes 6, 7, 8, 9 times, and not lose your rag when you do it, because you just accept they don't think logically, is all emotional. So it takes a while before it's like, okay. And then on the flip side, women are like, well, he just doesn't get it, how I feel. But they don't realize that we don't use feelings for the most part to make choices. When men use feelings to make choices is mostly when men go and kill other men. They got their feelings involved and they went too far. So I think there's a lot of lessons that both men and women should be able to learn. And I hope that I'm trying, I want with this show, especially talking to you, that that's the goal here, to try to help us to get a better understanding of each other and how we think and what's not. So do you consider Rollo Tomassi's ideas dangerous for young men? Yes or no? And why?
I think Rollo Tomassi's ideas are essential for young men. And and one thing it reminded me of, there's plenty of other commentators out there. One guy named Orion Caravan who recently said that the price of protection is civility. So if a woman really wants a man to protect her, don't go up and slap him in the face or talk trash to him, because it's the same with the other guy. Guy comes up and talks trash to you, you're not going to protect them, right? You're not going to protect the person who's treating you like that. So the price of protection is civility. But I think they're essential. Like I said, the attitude that men have towards women is incredibly important. Game is incredibly important. You got to recognize that women are indirect in their communications, and they're constantly testing us. We call them shit tests, And so we need to. So Rollo Tomassi's, men need to understand these things in order to navigate them successfully. And that's what I think what Rollo Tomassi is actually doing he's not attacking women, he's helping men. And when you finally read the materials, and when you finally read The Rational Male, and you start to look at the evolutionary psychology, and you start to realize that, well, you start to get the idea of how women actually are thinking and what they're doing. And then you got to really take a step back and say, oh, this is reality.
It is true.
And it's painful.
It's true.
And what happens is you regret not having learned it earlier. I mean, I regret not having learned this stuff when I was younger. I wasn't ready for it. Maybe I couldn't. Sometimes we just aren't ready for it. But the pickup artist stuff, I tried to find a good wingman. I couldn't find a good wingman. I couldn't do it myself. I never finished the book. It's out of date now. But all these things are to help men have successful relationships with women. They're not designed to disadvantage women or take advantage of women. They're to prevent us as men from being taken advantage of, to make us aware of how women operate, and that there's this beta, alpha group, and women are out now, they want to say, oh, how are we going to solve this problem? There's this problem with not enough men, whatever it is. The problem they're trying to solve is, how do I get my alpha seed, or I don't know what your language requirements is, but alpha sex and beta bucks, and get my needs. How do I get that met? And every solution, whether it's polyamory, they talk about polyamory, which is just a hookup culture. Polyamory is about love, committed, loving relationships, not about sharing men. So we just need to recognize that if we're not aware of what the dark side of female nature, I mean, when I went to fraternity, I was completely horrified. I thought I was going to meet sweet women, that I could have a girlfriend. And so many guys think they go out of high school, they want a girlfriend. And I wanted a girlfriend. And, they're not ready they want you. They don't want you as a boyfriend. Maybe if you're lucky, they want you for sex. And probably going to be an older one. And they don't want you for that. So you have to have a realistic view. And if you don't have a realistic view of how women behave, then you're not going to be successful in dating. You're not going to understand that they're not going to love you for who you are. You're going to have to get in shape. You're going to have to make yourself look good. Even now, it's more important that you get in shape, that you make yourself look good, because that's the thing that women are attracted to. Dress nice, and you start to understand you have to have more success with women. And it helped me to actually date. I was dating this one woman for 20 years who was sort of abusive in a way, just because. But then the moment I started learning that women share men is the moment I stopped saying, I'm not doing anything wrong by having multiple relations. Women are sharing men. I'm the lucky guy to be shared. I'm lucky to be shared by women. It's not that I'm doing anything wrong, and it's not that I'm out there just having sex with different women and different women and different. No, it's that, hey, this is it. The women are coming to me. But now, eventually, I ran into somebody that I wanted. I ran into somebody who I thought who had those characteristics that I was looking for, and that's the only. And if you're going to find it, that's the only way is to date multiple women and recognize what they're doing and not get all butthurt and upset that she cheated on you. That's what they're, whatever. Why did you commit?
Hey guys, so we can take a very, very short, quick break to here to say, if you're getting value from this conversation, hit pause for just 1 second. Drop a comment with your biggest takeaway so far, and let's get this discussion going. Don't forget to like this episode, share it with a friend, and if you're listening on one of the podcast platforms like Spreaker, Spotify, or Apple, leave a 5-star rating. That's how we spread these conversations and challenge the status quo. So let's dive right back into it. So you teach concepts like plate theory and hypergamy. How do you show men what's useful versus what's toxic in practice?
Well, that's sort of more probably on an individual basis. I think men need to be aware that women will, and they all know this, will abuse and exploit us and take advantage of us, whether it's buying the most expensive thing, being with us for dates and yet going to the stripper for their sex and then acting like, they want to be friends with us. We got to recognize that it's women's behavior, not ours. Prostitution is women's behavior. It's not men's behavior. That's women's behavior. Why do women do that? They do that for a variety of reasons. It's not all because they're poor. A lot of times it's just because they're beautiful and they can make a lot of money doing it. So, and then you get these young, and how many of them are taking cash? How many of them are earning extra money? How many of these women are doing this? They're not all on the streets doing it. And then you go out with the dates, and then you're paying, and then they are looking at your bank account, deciding what kind of car you're trying to determine whether you earn sufficient income for them to want to be with you. So these are women's behaviors, and men are just adapting. Men, the good thing about prostitution is that men can get sex, but it's not the best always. It's not necessarily very good, and sometimes it's a scam, sometimes it's dangerous, but at least that's available to men who might otherwise not be able to do it, have sex. And so these are how women behave, and we're just adapting, and this is what the rep is, just trying to adapt to women's behavior. So the thing with plate theory, spinning plates, that's dating non-exclusively. Women do it all the time. Women are experts. It's just natural for them. And one guy's going to ask them out. They're either going to say yes or no. Another guy's going to ask them out. They're either going to say yes or no. And then they're going to schedule their dates, right? So that they don't overlap. And so that's what women do. And sort of the attack on us that women engage in, it's part of not taking that lack of accountability and terrible negativity. It's like we're responsible for women's behavior. It's an inability to accept responsibility and to accountability. That women tend to want to blame men for everything. War is one thing that women want to blame men for. They want to tell us if women were in charge, we wouldn't have so much war. Baloney. Hybristophilia again. Women are deeply involved at every level. They're dating men who have power for the reason that they have power. They're involved, and it's not just that they're just out shopping, right? And somehow these wars aren't providing them with the material goods and the safety and in some cases money in order to do those things. That men are dying for women and children, that we're not toxic, we're not, we're die for women and children. It's not about equality, because men are dying work at jobs. 98% of workplace deaths are men. There's no real equality between women and men. And to sort of all this negativity directed at men is toxic. So I don't care if a woman has blue hair or not, or has tattoos so much, but they are red flags. Who is this woman who tatted herself up? Who is this woman that has blue hair? What does she actually think about you? What does she actually think about us? And what is she doing behind our backs? And how are they ruling? So none of this stuff, the idea that somehow men are toxic creators of violence and the problem that needs to be solved is highly negative. And men should see themselves more positively. That's one thing. Don't take responsibility for women's behavior, and recognize that we really are the backbone society, and we're not doing these things wrong. I mean, so much shame that's put on men, and that I've really felt a lot. So I think these things are important. Hypergamy is important to understand. Dating non-exclusively is important for every man. Understanding women's nature is vastly important. And, not being the white knight, learning how to be the alpha male and not the white knight. I grew up, I was the white knight. I wanted to do the right thing. I wanted to do the good thing. I'm a good child care, good guy with children, good. Women aren't interested in that until maybe they're looking for that. And then it's not about sex. And what you want women to be is interested in you, have what's called genuine burning desire for you. So if you go out and you try to find a beautiful woman that you are attracted to and have desire for, but if she doesn't have that desire for you, what is she there for? I mean, they're already there for plenty of other reasons. So you need a woman who has genuine burning desire for you. If she doesn't have genuine burning desire, doesn't really attracted to you, then you can, don't commit to her. Don't get into that type of relationship.
So what do you think about what they say in the red pill community, where women just are and men have to become? What are your views on that?
Well, it's true that many women, if they're beautiful and they're attractive, and from a very young age, they know their power. That's the peak of their power. And how they use it is going to be determines in their life. If they're going to go around screwing all these guys, having sex with all these guys, and then all of a sudden at 30, they're scrambling, they're trying to find a guy who's going to foot the bill and donate the sperm and provide the bank account. If they had only found that guy when they were at high market value, they may have been better off. But so I guess that's and
okay. So you said just now that men really need to date non-exclusively. Now, a lot of women push back on that, where they believe that men should only date one woman. But I think that there's some validity in men dating multiple women at the same time, because and there's some nuance to that. And the reason why I say there's some nuance is that men tend to have a mindset of conquering. Again, there's nuance in that. Men tend to have to feel like they are desired or they are desirable by the opposite sex, because that tends to come with the mindset of being disciplined, working hard, making more money, have higher levels of testosterone, being active in the gym and stuff. So that's why I say there is some nuance to it, because you can always, the same things that I said just now, you could always find negative traits about those same things. But I do think that a man that is in his peak or prime tends to be a man that is dating multiple women, has higher levels of testosterone, doing good in his career, generally in good shape, and good with women to the point where he doesn't pedestalize them. Because I think one of the biggest mistakes that men make is, one of my coaches, he said the same thing, one-itis. Men tend to get one-itis early on in their dating career, and they tend to pedestalize women. So do you think then that men, to be successful, do have to have those traits that I outlined there in order to be better partners and husbands and boyfriends and stuff like that?
I think a lot of us have listened to women, and that was a mistake. To listen to women talk about the men that they want and how they're looking for that man, and then to find out they're really not telling you. They're telling you what they want and the guy they are hot for. They want the guy to be, they're not telling you what they really want. They're just telling you the additional things they would like the man to be. Oh, he should be rich, studly, hot, have money, and that guy should be nice to me. But this idea that we should only date one woman at a time, I mean, never listen to, we don't want to really listen to what women say, because they say one thing, they do another. They don't know what they want, and they're highly negative. So first mistake is to actually listen to what a woman tells you. And then when you realize what they're really doing, dating multiple men, looking for alpha fucks, going to strip shows. They have their side guy, they have their Chad, they have that. They dated another guy. They tell you, well, let's just be friends first. That's code for saying I'm already getting fucked by, I'm already having sex with somebody else. Sorry about that. And so, so if we look at what women are actually doing, we need to recognize that we have to do some things too. We need to date multiple women. We need to be able to, because that's what they're doing. They come and tell us, oh, you're just doing this and that, but that's what they're doing. So it's kind of like, yeah,
So do you think it is a fair statement to say you ignore what women say and just look at how women act, react, and what they do? Is that a fair statement then?
Yeah, exactly. Look at how they act. What they tell you and what they do are two different things. And so, yeah, you need to be aware of that, and not blame ourselves for it, and not act like we have to be what women tell us we should be, because that's almost a test in itself. If we just start hopping to doing what the woman tells us they want, then they know that we're weak. I mean, you can't tell a woman you love them too early, or else they'll lose attraction for you. You can't do certain things. You have to be game savvy. You have to be aware of what's really going on in their minds. When you tell a woman you love her, what does she think? He can't get anybody better.
That's such a sad reality, but it's actually true. I have realized that what women say they want, what women actually are attracted to, are almost literally the polar opposite. And because of that, I think what you said about game, and for women that are necessarily new to that term, it is very common in dating circles for men and dating coaches. And the reason why they call it game is that it is really a game that you're playing. And it is actually more a mental game than anything else, where you can't give too much attention, but you can't give no attention. So because I coach guys as well, and I do have some young men that I coach, I tell them to basically focus on their journey and focus on themselves instead of necessarily focusing on looking for women. Because one of the things that I find is not really taught to men is that we we are not told what are the most important things that we need to focus on as young men. And I think that this is one of the good things that the red pill community teaches men is focus on becoming. So you work hard to try to get yourself in a good economic situation. So like in your 30s, you are attractive. Get into really good shape so that you add another dimension to yourself. Because if you are not necessarily a good looking man, but you have a nice physique, you can add a little bit more attraction to you. And then if you have experience in terms of dating women, then when you get to a place where you choose to want to have a family because you've had some experience, it means you can navigate. Because what tends to happen is, like you said, men get one-itis and then they get wrecked because they go and get married. And then today, modern society is about 70% of divorces are initiated by women. And
Right.
it financially wrecks men.
Mhm.
So I think that one
Emotionally too.
emotionally as well, I think that one of the key things for a man is to really focus on his purpose, his mission, improve himself mentally, spiritually, and physically, so that he can become the man he really wants to be. So by default, he becomes attractive instead of necessarily chasing a lot of women when you're young, because it tends to have you looking here and there, and you end up wasting a lot of money and time instead of building up yourself, right? So
Right. Yeah, I think that's right. I think um, that one thing is that recognize that women are, and I don't want to say this, but that they sell themselves. They're innately, and especially when they're young, they're not looking for a relationship. I mean, you got to recognize that, and you got to act accordingly. And these women will come and tell you, "Oh, you're not being true. Only one man, so forth, and all that." But really, they're not ready for a relationship at all. And so you've got to realize that they're just there. And I had this one young man say they're for entertainment purposes only. It's a sad,
recreational
but
purposes only. Yeah.
yeah, recreational purposes only. They're not relationship material at that age. So if you go in with that, like my idea, I wanted a girlfriend, that was stupid. Really, I mean, I saw other guys had girlfriends, but really, if I understood how women really were and that they weren't really looking for relationships, then maybe I wouldn't have put so much blame on myself. And I think with this game thing, I've actually have taken a different tack. I started to learn comedy, so I'm taking this comedy class right now. And on October 5th, there's going to be a graduation show, and I'm doing sort of red pill comedy, where I'm going through this same things you hear on date after date after date after date. The women say the same things. They don't know that the women before them said the exact same thing that they said. They think they're original. They think that that's them. That's only them. But they're saying the exact same things over and over. And so I try and make comedy out of this relationship. And sort of, there's a real taboo on making women the butt of jokes. There's a taboo about that. So I'm sort of breaking that taboo. You get so many derogatory comments about men by comics, because men are great to pick on, but half of what's being said is not really fully true. So I'm working on developing comedy as a way to speak truths that people really can't swallow otherwise. And that's what these red pill truths are. People have difficulty swallowing the truth most of the time. And so it's absolutely right. When I focused on my career, okay, so 30 wasn't the time when I became attractive. I wasn't necessarily red pilled at 30. I didn't get red pilled until after 50 years old. So, but I did focus on my career. I sort of was horrified, and I had women who would come, but they were not relationship material. Really, I didn't necessarily think of it that way. But when I look back on it now, I see that they simply were not. And I couldn't tolerate some of it. It's interesting. I have post-traumatic reaction to certain behaviors, and I need to know what's going to happen. I can't just be pulled into a situation where I may be pulled up on stage or have to behave. And women think they can do anything when it comes to sex, but I focused on my career. I got my law degree. I came out to do Social Security disability law. I didn't get married. I never got married, so I was saving, and now I've saved enough to retire. A lot of people don't have enough money to retire. And then I got red pill. I grew a beard. I lost a little bit of weight, made myself a little better looking, got some action, and maybe found the person that I feel at age 60, this is the only point. Women aren't really looking for a man for the rest of their lives until they're in their 50s. When they're in their 20s, they're not looking for a man, period, unless they can really stumble onto a rich guy. And then in their 30s, they may be looking for a man, but it's not forever. Yeah, sure, it would be nice if it goes to the very end, but basically it's still short term. It's still marriage, children, support, protection type of thing. And so they're not really ready to get with a man to be with for the rest of their lives until they hit their 50s and 60s. And then, like you said, the gray divorce situation, where they will leave the man they've been with all their life because they want to have this new chapter in their lives, they call it, a new chapter, which is a new chapter, a new man, a new romance. That's what they want. So in some ways, I feel it's safer for me to get into a committed relationship, at 61, even to get married at 61, because the woman is finally there saying, I want to spend my final years with, going around the world, having romantic adventures with a man that I have burning, genuine desire for, and so forth. And so it's not until you get to 50 or 60 that women are actually looking for a long-term relationship, and that they will fool you all along, and they will fool themselves. This is a story of Adam and Eve. Women will deceive themselves in order to deceive men.
Okay.
And so
if a young man quoted Rollo Tomassi as gospel to you, what would you tell him first if he did that?
Well, I don't know if anything's gospel. You have to keep this is the thing when we get to the discussion of propaganda. You have to be critical. You have to ask, what are they not telling you? What are they not saying? And so you can't take anything as gospel. You got to have a critical mind. And this is where I get concerned, because truth gets combined with falsehood, and then it becomes misleading. So this is where a lot of the red pill community is very conservative, very pro-Trump, authoritarian, and almost sometimes. And so this is where it's easy to be deceived and to think that this one man, whether it's Trump or whoever, is our savior, or this Rollo Tomassi is our savior. Even Jesus, and the church is, you're not going to get everything out of it. So you need to keep your minds open and listen to what other people have to say, because that's key. These dating coaches, they maybe have slight disagreements, but they have a lot of good things to say. So I would say, read a book. Oftentimes it makes sense to us, but we're not as critical. And then you can see things that you disagree with here and there. Make up your own mind, read somebody else, see what they say, how they, and then you can grow. And I wouldn't treat it is gospel. But I would think that Rollo Tomassi's is good. In fact, I'm sending a book. I sent books to my nephew. In fact, I'm going to send him this other book by him. It's The Player's Handbook. I just finished it. It's all dog-eared and stuff. I'm going to send it to my nephew. We'll put a note in it that says, when you finally decide to read these things, you'll regret that you didn't read it earlier. And
I believe that he will say that for sure.
Yeah. So the future. So if you really want to know how to be successful with women, you're going to need to learn about their psychology and the red pill, and that's going to help you tremendously. And it's painful. It is terribly painful to go through, and there's regret that you didn't learn it earlier. But once you start to learn it, maybe you can start to get some women finally, and you won't be an average frustrated chump. And you won't be taken advantage of.
True, because men tend to have a lot of rejection before they start to learn. And some men, they never learn after a lot of rejection because they tend to become recluse, where they become almost like hermits, where they just check out of the dating market. So you began as a pro-feminist, and now you host red pill discussions. Do you see yourself as building a bridge or as a critic of both camps?
I see myself as building bridges. I do see myself now. I may be a critic of both camps, and I may not be successfully building bridges, but just because I'm red pill doesn't mean I'm anti-feminist anymore. I am concerned about anti-male propaganda and the whole state of this situation where we can't even listen to one another. I just, just bringing up men's issues and men's rights will get you shut down in certain circles. We shut each other down. Nobody's really listening. And so I'm glad you're doing this so that people can listen. That's why I'm doing this, to have people, listen to, because you get shut down and kicked out, and they just make presumptions, and there's the propaganda. So what I'm working on is counter propaganda, just like this shirt. Men are not toxic. Masculinity is not toxic. Masculinity is attractive. I want to do something we have Veterans Day coming up. I have another shirt that says, men defend our country. Men deserve respect and honor. Put these messages out there so that, because the problem I see is in propaganda, and I think certain sort of influences of this propaganda. I think, for instance, there are people like Putin and Trump, the party, political, they're all using propaganda to manipulate us. These are powers greater than ourselves. Paul talked about the powers and authorities that rule this world. And when we talk about sort of enlightenment and having an impact on the world and finding inner peace, part of that is our hope, maybe, that a lot of these things are out of our control. A lot of these things are not, their power greater than us who are manipulating us, whether it's Putin, the media, political parties, politicians, leaders, everybody's propaganda. And you see, that's a big concern of mine. So that's what I'm trying to do is propaganda, is counter propaganda, but also the idea of enlightenment and acceptance of the fact that we live in a world where there are powers greater than us who are having an influence. And really, it's like whack-a-mole, where you get one negative message, you try and whack that, another negative message comes up, you have to whack that. It's a never-ending battle. But I'd like to get men to stand up for themselves, to learn to stand up to women. We not always have to bow to them and agree, and we're not always the bad guy. There's this idea that women are the victims, men are the perpetrators. Women are vulnerable, men are disposable, which is probably true. But the women perpetrate just as much as men. In a different way. They may be less physically violent, but they still perpetrate crimes and abuse and even physical violence. And so,
Okay, so question. What strategies do you teach men today for attracting the right partner in such a polarized dating market?
well, like you said, one thing is to recognize one, that looks and appearance are important. So I see so many guys, I go to concerts, they're in this ratty t-shirt, and they already have other deficits, like they may be fat and bald, and then come with a ratty t-shirt. You're really just shooting yourself in your foot like that. Women dress up nice and sexy because it attracts men. In this day and age, you're going to have to be handsome and sexy as well, and good looking, as best you can. So that's one thing. Like you said, get in shape, focus, and focus on your career and all of that when you're young and so forth. And then the next thing is to date non-exclusively. Make sure you have a lineup. They say that, a lot of these guys who are having sex or are being shared by men, say they're alpha jets, they have a lineup of sevens and sixes, and women they're not going to marry, but they have a whole lineup of women. And, just because women want what other women want. So you need to be successful with women if you want other women to want you. So you need to start dating non-exclusively and getting that exercise in, getting that work in. And those are the two main things. And then also you're getting your house in order. I'm not so big on that. I think that women should contribute to the household. I think they always have contributed to the household, and now they have this extra privilege. They're incredibly privileged. You use that word privilege in the sexual markets, and they are highly. That's why they want equality in every place but dating and relationships. They don't want equality there. Equality everywhere else, but not there, because they have their advantage.
That is true. Because a woman would finish with a man if she has to split a bill with him. She would.
Yeah.
And it has happened.
Plenty of times. Yeah. And I think women should, because when in history, women contributed. Maybe they didn't have a job, but man, they sewed clothes, they cooked, and everything by scratch. I mean, women were real economic contributors to the household. And now there's this idea that they all want to be kept women, that they all should be provided for, they all should be protected, that they shouldn't have to work. And it's a status thing if you can get a guy to take care of you. Now, the more beautiful, this is the thing, a lot of women say, oh, I'm not like that. Not all women are like that, but it's true. But the dividing line is not between the good woman and the bad woman. The dividing line is beauty. The more beautiful you are, the less compromises a woman's going to make. So,
yes, that's an absolute fact. Because they get tons of attention from the age of maybe 14 years old. And because now we have social media, they get hit up from the age of 18 by blue check marks and athletes and famous people. So what happens is that because they get so much attention, they tend to have a warped sense of reality, And I find that causes men to make a lot of mistakes. So what are the biggest mistakes men are making in modern dating, and how can they course correct?
Oh, well, that's a big one. But the first one is to buy into the feminine and not be red pilled. That's, is to buy into that narrative of the one woman, one man type of scenario. The woman's only telling you that, because she doesn't want you. She wants you to be with her only, but she still wants to date those other guys, right? So she wants to make sure you're lined up with her. And then once she feels secure, and this is a big mistake, once she feels secure, then she can start looking around for other people. So don't commit. I mean, I went on so many dates with The first meeting, they're talking about, I don't have sex outside a committed relationship. I try to make a comedy routine out of it. And they say, you're free not to have sex for as long as you want. Don't let this idea that you can't date multiple women and you can't have a lineup of whether they're 4s or 5s or 2s or whatever, that you can't have your own lineup. Women share men. Don't think that because you're going to be a good guy, that you're going to be a one-woman man. There are really no one-woman women. I mean, one-man women, they're all doing it and they're sharing men. So don't feel guilty about doing that. They have, they're trying to get something from you. They have their criteria, right? And a relation. And then also you've got the one-itis, this idea that this is the one woman for me. Rollo Tomassi says that we just meet each other's requirements. We just are able to offer to one another and meet the requirements that we're looking for. Now, I'm not sure because I'm spiritual, and I do, it's not just Christianity. I do divination, tarot cards, things like that. And just this weekend, I had my girlfriend, and we were doing a bullet reading. And, the mystical things that happen, we pass around this bowl, and in the bowl, there's bullets that we take out, and then we read for other people. Well, it was just me and her at the end there, and there were 2 pieces of paper in there that I could see clearly. One said sun, one said sunflower. I knew that she was going to end up reading for me because I was sun, and I knew that was her because of the connection. So there is a spirit. There may be some spiritual connections. There may be the right woman. There may be spirit working for you when you meet that right woman, or bringing these women together. But just don't think that this woman is sweet and nice and is not doing shit behind your back. You need to learn about that and keep your guard up and date multiple men non-exclusively, and don't let them tell you that just because we're having sex, if they want you to commit in order to have sex, say, well, you know what? We don't have to have sex, and you should be getting that elsewhere. You don't need to get it from that one woman. Get it elsewhere.
That's
And
very
don't let
interesting.
that woman tell you, that you have to commit to her. Because the moment you do, it's like a test. It's like a shit test. You've just admitted that you've got nobody else, and that's sort of that woman wants a man who other women want, and other men want to be, and other women want to have sex with. So don't tell her you don't have anybody else.
It's a real irony when you think about it, that women are attracted to men that other women want. So even though women say that they want their man to just be with them, what I realize is that the day that a woman realizes that her guy isn't being desired by other women, she tends to lose attraction for him. And she tends to be much more into him when she realizes that other women want to sleep with him. So is this kind of a real dichotomy where, men actually need to be attractive to women? And I mean, you can bring the morality issue into it, but I'm not going to go there. I'm going to say that when men do have sex with multiple women, they are much more attractive, and women tend to be a lot more interested in them because, like you said, it's just this, even in men, human nature is that we all want the things that other people desire and that we necessarily can't have. So there seems to have to be this sort of unconscious understanding that he can leave and get another woman and she will tend to be more into him. So if masculinity is in crisis, what are the first steps men can take to rebuild it consciously?
Well, yeah, one of the things you were talking about is called dread, and Rollo Tomassi talks about it, this idea that the woman is more excited and sexually stimulated when she's afraid, there's the potential of losing you. And then once that potential of losing you goes away, they become much more blasé, much more take you for granted, and so forth. But your question was, can you repeat it for me again?
Sure. If masculinity is in crisis, what are the first steps men can take to rebuild it consciously?
I think we need to learn to stand up to women and stand up for ourselves. And I think we need to create, women cannot represent us. If we, and there's this idea that, oh, men are the ones that empower. Men are represented by, they're just there, they're represented. But no, our itch, we need to represent ourselves, in this thing. It's not, equality and so forth, and talking about inequality and men living in despair and loneliness and the depths of despair, and how the court system is most guys get red pilled when they end up in the court system and realize how unfair things are.
Facts.
And so, yeah, so we need to be able to stand. Women going to male strippers, do we really want that? As men, are we really, we get in our idea, oh, they're coming, oh, they're going to strip, they're going to come out all horny, just like me going to strip. I'm going to come out all horny, right? But no, they've already had sex. The strip shows are not what you think they are. And when she's looking at an alpha, she's denigrating you some ways, but, that they've already had it. They've already, it's basically prostitution in a lot of these clubs. They think because gay men had these male strippers that they can perform oral sex on, and that women can do that too. And the reality is we don't get that. We may be able to go to a brothel and get some sex, but we're not going to a strip club or a strip show and getting it, and it's going to be very, very costly. So we need to be able to stand up to women and stand up for ourselves. And we need a movement to deal with some of the issues that men are facing. I mean, let's face it, we're not going to be able to provide for women anymore. We're not going to be able to, a lot of men are being left alone. We're heading to a world where most women are going to be childless and alone, a large percentage, 30-40% of women, because they just can't accept being with a man at their level, because they got so used to, and they can have sex with a guy who's a top 1%er, and they don't need a guy to pay for the bill. So why do they need a guy around? And then, but also, yeah, we need to be able to stand up for ourselves and to be able to stand up to women, because you certainly can't be a yes man. You got to know how to say no to women.
I realize that the irony is that the more you say no to a woman, the more attractive you become, and obviously there's balance and that, you have to be reasonable. But I think that is an absolute fact that if you're a yes man and everything and every time she wants something, you say yes, it becomes like, okay, well, I can get that now. So you lose attraction to them. So I do agree with that statement, where you have to be able to tell them no, and stick to your no and not change. So what daily practice or mindset shift has had the greatest impact on your own healing and growth?
Well, one thing I wanted to say in response to what you just say, I often tell men, don't pay for anything that doesn't make you a better lover. Don't pay for the cam girls. Of course you have to pay for dates sometimes, but don't pay for cam girls and strippers. And if they're not having sex with you, if they're not making you a better lover, then you're just wasting your money on them and encouraging this type of behavior, which is exploitative. So that's one thing that I say, don't go around acting like a beta and leading with your wallet. Try and get, if you can, lead with sex. You want them to desire you physically more than you want them to desire your money or your status or your job, although they're going to do that. And there'll probably be other things. So I'm just asking, and that may be right for me. And maybe some guys, they're just not going to be able to get women. They're going to have to pay them. They're going to have to pay them. And women expect money oftentimes. Even if they're not prostitutes, they expect to be paid. And so just take advantage of that situation. Don't get yourself hooked up into it. Like I went to Brazil recently, and I knew the woman was basically there because I'm American for money. Yeah, they have this. Yeah, they want to lock you down. Yeah, they want to have that relationship. Yeah, they want to get a guy who like that. But you don't have to capitulate to them. You don't have to feel bad about because they're trying to go after you for their own reasons. So just pick and choose.
Okay, so what daily practice or mindset shift has had the greatest impact on your own healing and growth?
Well, I think a lot of it is my own recognizing that it's not my fault. So much of the time I felt, women, why am I having so much trouble? I mean, I didn't like women's behavior. I didn't like women. I thought they were pretty. I thought they were attractive. I was attracted to them, but their behavior and who they were and how they acted, I didn't like it. And so that really caused me a lot of problems. I put a lot of blame on you're feeling like you're not lovable, feeling not unlovable, feeling undesired, and wanting women to love you for who you are, And you just got to take a step back and realize that women aren't that good. They're not so good that they're going to love you. Only your mother loves you for who you are. No, women don't. They love you for what you can do for them and what you can do and your status and your power. Of course, looks is extremely important. So I think the mind shift is to move back from, trying to find that girlfriend. Monogamy as a goal. We talk about how monogamy is a growth and outcome of dating non-exclusively. That you finally meet that woman. You're not going to, if you set it with a goal in your mind that you want to get married or have a relationship, don't do that, because most of the women that you're with, maybe they're not even considering that, with you. But so just have a mindset that women are not sweet and spice and everything nice. They're not. And when they talk to you about, and they say, well, I'm not like that, there's a lot of, they're just, it's not because they're better. Maybe they're just not as attractive, and they can't do it, or maybe they're lying to you, or maybe they're not, just don't be so into being the white knight and being protected. Take everything they say with a grain of salt. Don't be afraid to have multiple women. They're doing the same thing to you. They're trying to get stuff from you. Just try and meet women that are like, I met a woman who will pay for herself, contribute to the relationship, is reasonably pretty, enough for me, who has sort of an austere background. She didn't hang out for sororities or going to strip clubs or have her alpha widow, which is, she has this guy or these guys that she screwed. She thinks she can get them again, but she's really not at their level, but she can't get them out of her head. And you would never compare to that. So, or they think that, their life is going to be them going to the strip club and sending their men off to the strip club and then them going to have sex with male prostitutes. Just keep in mind, who they really are and not your fantasy of them. And then you can sort of see that, which ones are better. None of them are good, but which ones are better than the others. And if you have that attitude, at least you're coming with the right attitude. You're not coming with this, puppy dog sort of, I'll do anything to make you love me type of attitude. You got to have a completely different attitude, as if, you can leave me. If you leave me, it doesn't matter, because there's another one right around the corner.
I think that's a very good distinction to have, because I realize that a lot of women don't really love men unconditionally. They love men conditionally, and men tend to love women unconditionally, which is why men tend to not leave relationships more than women, because a man would put up with a lot more stuff from her. But the numbers show that if women leave end marriages, or apply for divorce about 70% of the time, it shows you that when the conditions that were there before are not there, they tend to leave 7 times more, 70% more, right? While a man would tend to be love more unconditionally. And I think also that, men need to realize that the only woman that will really, really love you unconditionally is probably your mother, and to some
Right.
degree your sister, if you have a good relationship with your sister. Because, I mean, not all women are like this, but I think that today, modern day women, I think most women fall into that category. And if you do get the anomaly, or the one that is not in the matrix like that, I think you found the winner. But I think that the mathematics are that the probability is low, but the possibility is there. And I think that this is one of the differences between men and women. Men tend to look at possibility, while women look at probability. So the probability of a woman getting a man that has a lot of money is probable. Is it possible? Mathematically, maybe not. So let's get you to hear on this one. If you could leave every man listening with one message to carry into his relationships, what would it be?
That's a good question. Lead. You're a leader. You're born to be a leader. The woman wants you to lead that relationship. So you're in charge. She wants it that way. She's going to try, though, in every way to divert you from that. And she's not going to realize. She's going to do the shit test. She's going to manipulate you. She's going to try and get you to do this. She's going to try and get you to that. But just remember that you need to maintain your role as the leader in the relationship. Like with this woman that I'm dating, I was sun, she was sunflower. Sunflower always looks up to the sun. And so your woman always has to look up to you. And so you need to probably date somebody that is lesser than you for that to happen. But whatever the case is, you are the leader. She's going to ask you to pay for dates. If she's going to ask you to pay for dates, if she wants to go someplace, she can pay. She can buy the tickets, right? You decide where you're going to go, and then also she's going to ask you to pay. Then you're going to leave. Now if she wants to pay for stuff, okay, maybe she has more say. But I personally am looking for a woman who's going to contribute financially to the relationship. I don't want to be screwed over. I don't feel women deserve to be paid for that. After what I went through, I know what their real behavior is. Why should they be paid? So, but if you want to pay for a woman, if you want to be the provider, okay, be careful with that. But you are definitely going to lead that relationship, because if you're the one footing the bill, you're the one who makes the decisions. And if a woman wants to both take your money and make the decisions for you, she's setting you up. She's going to leave you, because women want you to be their leader. They want to look up to you. And regardless of what they say about equality and all of this stuff, and in relationships. One joke I have is this woman that I'm with now, she won't even let me wash the dishes. She won't even let me wash the dishes. How many women are out there complaining about men not washing the dishes? This woman won't even let me do that. She wants to be a wife. A lot of women really don't want to be a wife. They want a sex partner. They want somebody to entertain them. They want somebody to do things with. But do they really want to fulfill the duties of a wife? So probably not.
Rich?
So just
yeah. So finish what you were saying.
Yeah, that's about it. So just leave the relationship. Make sure that you're in charge, because that's what they want, and don't think that they want otherwise than that.
Okay, Rich, it's been a very interesting conversation, and I hope that we've been able to touch on some of these topics and bring some nuance to them, because my idea and my goal here is to try to, have thought provocation and to get people to ask questions, because none of us have all the answers, but I think that we've touched on some subjects today that, while controversial, some people will resonate highly with. Others may say, "Hey, Todd, what are you doing?" Da, da, da. But I think that we have to have these conversations because it is all part of the evolution of human consciousness. And one of the things that is part of the evolution of human consciousness is relationships, which means the social dynamics between men and women. So, with that being said, please tell the lovely people at the Conscious Man 7 where they can find you. Tell us about any things that you have going on, any projects, anything you want to plug, and all that kind of good stuff.
Okay, so you look at I have a Nonpartisan Red Pill Men's group on YouTube. You can register for our monthly meetings. They are at Sundays, the first Sunday of the month at 2:00 Pacific time, and you can register for that by going to tinyurl.com/redpillmen. I also have a YouTube, Truth and Democracy Coalition.com. You'll find a lot of information about me and my activities, both past, present, and going into the future. I'm starting a new channel called The Political Psychic, where I do readings on current events and social issues. And also, I'm having my birthday party, and everybody who's in Bellflower, California, can go to the website of the Stand Up Comedy Club and get a ticket for my birthday on October 15th. It's our graduation class, and here's some red pill comedy. So I'm also on Facebook, but the main ones are the Nonpartisan Red Pill Men's Group and Truth and Democracy Coalition.com. I also have Truth and Democracy Coalition YouTube page as well. So those are some ways to be in contact with me and get involved in this movement.
Awesome stuff. And guys, all the links to everything that Rich has got going on will be in the description of this podcast. And one of the things that he touched on today that's really important is that men need to get into shape. Guys, if you want to be more attractive to women, you want to have high levels of testosterone, feel like yourself, get into the best shape, and to improve your mindset, and you're ready to go on a journey mentally, physically, and spiritually, hit me up on my Instagram at Adriano_246 or my name Todd Cave, and I will help you to get into the best shape of your life, because I help spiritually inclined people burn fat and to build muscle. And if you are on a spiritual journey, or you would like to start a spiritual journey and you would like some help removing some fears and traumas, I can help you to get some magic mushrooms. So again, hit me up on my socials at Adriano_246, and let's see if I can help you to get some magic mushrooms. And if you would like to support this podcast, please remember that you can do that via our merch store. We have some cool tank tops, hoodies, shirts, and sweats. Link will be in the description of this podcast. And that helps us with things like editing of the podcast, spending time to get some great guests to come on. Like we had a chat today with Rich. And also, if you are a person that are listening on the podcast channels and you don't like all the ads that we have, you can also become a member of our Patreon or our locals community. and you will get early releases to the podcast, some exclusive content, and also get one-on-one direct access to me. And then also you can also not get ads. And this also helps the podcast because we have some more great, amazing guests coming, and we want to up the production, and we want to go back to 2 podcasts a week. So if you would like to be part of this journey, you like the content we do, please consider being a member of our Patreon or in our locals community. Rich, I just want to say thank you for being on the podcast today. In today's episode, I hope that we've opened your mind or challenged what you thought you knew about masculinity. Don't keep it to yourself. Share this with someone who needs it. Drop your thoughts in the comments. I want to hear where you stand on the red pill, Rollo Tomassi, and conscious masculinity. And if you aren't already, hit that subscribe button. Leave us a 5-star review if you're on Spreaker, Apple, or Spotify. This is the Conscious Man 7 podcast, where men rise, heal, and lead. Many thanks again, Rich, for coming on to the show. And, I think that we, covered some really interesting topics today. And these are topics that I want to start leaning into a little bit more, because I think they're quite important for what we have to come, because the stats that you said where in the future 35 to 40% of women will not have children and be single means then that men need to step up their game and get game in order to be attractive to women. Anyway, guys, this was another podcast. Thank you for tuning in to another great episode on the Conscious Man 7. Don't forget, keep smiling, keep shining, and keep being the change you want to see. Speak to you soon. Cheers and namaste.